This segment is brought to you by JigMasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to JigMasters.com and use promo code PNF20 and save 20% off your next jig order today.
Welcome to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. This is the final cast segment with your hosts Brad Hicks and Josh Eldridge, where we cast our final opinions on all products good and bad. Welcome to the final cast. You're listening to the final cast on the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. I'm your host, Brad. With me tonight is Jimmy and Brian. How you guys doing?
What's up?
Good.
Good to have you guys on. It's been a while since I talked to Brian.
Yeah.
He's too good for the rest of us over there on the OG show. You know, we don't exist anymore in the podcast realm.
Stop.
Yeah.
It was unfortunate. We missed you down at the meetup, dude.
Yeah,
So-
I'm sure you heard last week's episode with our Armando.
Yeah,
I was kind of talking a little crap to you guys.
that's all right. It's all fun and games.
Yep.
Until we actually meet up with you.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
Well, cool. We got a cool segment planned tonight. We had a few listeners send a message like me and Jimmy asked a few weeks ago, and people were wanting to talk about batteries. So we brought on Kevin Zanjani from Bioenno Power to talk about batteries. Welcome to the show, man.
Thank you for inviting me. Look forward to answering the questions tonight. Again, I'm Kevin with Bioenno Power. I'm National Sales Manager based out here in Santa Ana, California.
Awesome. So
How
long
warm
have
is
you
it
been?
out there? Well, I gotta ask this: how warm is it out?
It's in the 70s right now, low 70s today.
It's 32 here in Northern Illinois, so I
32.
envy you.
Yes.
Pretty cold here too.
Yeah, it was like
I know you guys
83 to
don't-
here today, so
Yeah, I envy both of you. Very cool.
So how long have you been with Bioenno?
I've been with the company since its inception. This is our 10th year, so we've been around since 2010, 10 years. Manufacturing lithium iron phosphate batteries and various other products too, like solar products that support the batteries for various different markets, including the marine market, which we've entered into this market in the past 5 years or so.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's growing rapidly. Lithium-ion batteries are getting real popular with the kayak anglers out here.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah, for sure. We're seeing a huge trend in switching over from old lead acid batteries. They just don't keep up with a lot of the equipment, fish finders, and now putting trolling motors as well. The lithium batteries tend to perform a lot better over a lead acid battery.
and the big thing's the weight too. I mean, we're limited on what kind of weight. I mean, some of these boats can handle hundreds and hundreds of pounds of extra weight, but I don't want an extra 80-pound battery if I don't have to have it, because I've done it and it's terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same here.
It's much lighter. In fact, we've got some. This is like a 12-volt, 12 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery. So this would typically, a lead acid version would be maybe about 11, 12 pounds. This is only about 3 pounds. So about a third the weight of a lead acid battery. It's pretty packaged pretty well in terms of for the marine environment. We put like a coating inside of it so make it water resistant. It's a little different than a lead acid battery because we put circuitry inside these batteries. It's like we have these little computer chips that are built into it called a protection circuit module or battery management system. And what that does is it what they call equalizes the voltage across all the cells inside the battery, protects against overcharge, over discharge, over current. So if you were to leave, let's say, your equipment turned on, it would protect the cells inside the battery. So the battery can last 2 to 3,000 charge cycles because of the chemistry that's inside of it, versus a lead acid battery, which lasts maybe about 200 cycles. So I know every season, a lot of people change out the lead batteries because they don't put it on the tender. They don't charge it. They forget to do that. And they realize, there's like acid came out the tops, it got all crusty and stuff. This doesn't happen with this chemistry. There's no sulfation, there's no acid in here. In fact, all these batteries, they're made up of these cylindrical cells. So this is the actual cells that are used to make up every particular lithium iron phosphate battery that we provide. And then they're all chained together in series and parallel to get the voltage and the capacity. So this type of cell is called a cylindrical spiral wound cell. It's different than what you find in the lithium batteries that are used in your phones. The ones used in your phones are called a pouch cell. They're not really intended for use for very high-end discharge. In other words, if you have like a fish finder that pulls a couple amps, those batteries are not really intended for that use. I know that some customers of ours that were initially trying lithium batteries, they were trying to use those little jump packs in order to power fish finders, and that didn't work out well. They need something that can support the voltage and the power that's required for the fish finders and for the trolling motors. You don't want to use those. You want to use something that's made up of cylindrical cells built inside the batteries. So
that actually kills what we were talking about last week, Brad. I think it was last week, about running a fish finder on the Anchor Power Pack that I use for my camera. You said, I bet you could. I said you probably could, but now I know that I'm wrong. So it probably works, just not long.
Yeah, it won't last long. It's there's a mismatch in the voltage. They use some kind of conversion circuitry that doesn't get you the right native voltage that's required to run the equipment. So the runtime will be really short. So something like this, we kind of match the size to meet the requirements. So you're replacing a lead acid battery with the lithium iron phosphate batteries, and then that's what gives you the runtime. It's very different. In fact, if you have like this is, for example, a 12 volt, 12 amp hour lithium battery, it's almost a 2-to-1 conversion. This would replace a 24 amp hour lead acid AGM battery because you can use all the capacity out of it. You know, lead battery is only 50% usable, so it's a huge advantage. And I have a larger one here, like a 20 amp hour lithium. 20 amp hour lithium is like 40 amp hour lead acid in terms of the runtime, and that thing is heavy. You know, it's this thing weighs about 7 pounds. That's probably going to be about 28, 30 pounds.
You think about, like, I have one of y'all's 100 amp. It's only 23 pounds or something like that.
Yeah. That thing is light.
And if it's a 2-to-1, I mean, good God, it's a lot.
Yeah. It's funny because I used to run the lead acid battery back in the day on my Bonafide, and like we talked about with weight, I mean, it just sagged that thing down. I mean, I'm not a light guy. You add that 80-pound battery, and now that I have the 100 amp hour, it's like, did I forget to put the battery in the back? Like, you know, because the boat's not sagging. But that's the thing too, and maybe you can touch on that a little bit, Kevin. You mentioned like lead acid has 50% power, whereas a lithium's 100% like full discharge. Maybe explain that a little bit for guys and gals that may not totally understand that whole concept.
Yeah, sure. So there's in a lead acid battery, if you were to run that battery full discharge, 12 volt, 12 amp hour, just use that as a simple example. If you pull 12 amps out of that battery, you would bring that voltage way down really fast, because the way that they rate the lead acid batteries, they don't want you pulling 12 amps out of a 12 amp hour battery. They want you to pull something like maybe 2 or 3 amps out of that battery to get you the correct runtime. It's what they call a lower discharge rating. It's called a D rating on the battery. Whereas with the lithium iron phosphate batteries, you can get all of that capacity out of it. If you pull, let's say in that 12 volt, 12 amp hour battery, this battery of this size, for example, you pull the 12 amps out of it, you're going to get all of that usable capacity out of the battery, because the chemistry, different than a lead acid battery, was intended for use at its maximum discharge current. So it can handle that runtime without any problems. The way that they rate lead acid batteries, they didn't rate them at the full amps that you could pull out of it. It's called a D rating, or a lower discharge rating on the batteries. They're rated over capacity over 5. So C over 5 rating, if you've probably seen that, it's basically how they rate the batteries in order to give the runtime that they're saying in a table. Whereas the lithium batteries, it's different. It's at what they call a 1C rate, meaning you can capture all that capacity at that max current that's required for running the equipment. And so that's the fundamental difference, is how they rate the batteries for lead acid is different than lithium, where it's rated at a higher rate for lithium, meaning you can capture all the capacity.
That's awesome. And for anybody that's listening to the podcast and not checking it out on YouTube, the cylindrical cell packs he's holding, just imagine for the size he had, it looked like a roll of quarters.
Yeah,
so it's
or
just
a
multiple
size D battery. That's what it reminds me of.
So there's just a series of those inside that casing, wired series. You're in a series. That's pretty awesome.
Or even a shotgun shell.
They kind of get all spot welded in here, and then they get packaged up into something like this for the marine environment. We do offer other batteries. They look something like this. They're a little different package. They have these connectors. They're on our website. You may have saw these batteries. These are for other markets, like radio communications equipment, where they plug it directly in the equipment. We're not intending this for the marine market because it's not a sealed package. Some customers, they've used dry bags and things like that. You have to put a little extra protection to use those batteries in a marine market. We advise using something that's sealed, where everything has been epoxied, and there's a coating, a conformed coating inside, protect the board and things like that. It's really important. Just want to emphasize that.
Something I'm familiar with from the non-marine rated batteries, I used to do RC cars, and we used to run 11.1 volt 3-cell lithiums. And you talk like we were required to carry them like at certain courses in lithium bags, because for anybody that's not familiar with lithium, if you've never seen one, like I've seen a guy cut one with a razor blade on accident. And the fire that happens from that is like, it's immediate and it's intense. So lithiums are definitely something you have to be safe with. But these packages that the marine rated batteries are in, I mean, they're pretty indestructible. Mine's tough.
Yeah, this is a little different than traditional lithium ion. I want to emphasize also, I said lithium iron phosphate, IRON.
Okay.
So iron phosphate is different than traditional lithium ion that's used in the polymer batteries for RC cars. If you go on YouTube, there are videos. They actually can stick a nail through the cell without having any kind of fire or any situation like that.
Awesome.
Because the chemistry we're using, iron phosphate, which is written here on the side, is inert. In other words, it doesn't. The bond is very, very tight. So it's not subject to any issues if there's puncture that occurs inside the cell. From a safety standpoint, it's superior over polymer-based.
Oh yeah, no, that makes me feel even better.
Yeah,
way better.
That's why in this market for marine use, we focus on that chemistry for all our markets that we're in, and it lasts. The cycle life is also longer than a traditional lithium-ion (ION) batteries, like the ones that are in your phones. These are polymer batteries, and these batteries, for the polymer batteries, they maybe last about 800 cycles, and then they don't. Your phone battery maybe lasts a couple of years, and you'll notice after 2 years the cycle life is much, much shorter. Whereas this one, it's like 2,000 to 3,000 cycles, and that's almost like a 7 to 10 year service life on it. And we have the original ones out there. We brought them to market in 2012, and the original ones are out there since 2012. It's been 8 years. We go back to those original customers, their OEM customers, and they said, we're asking them, do you need to change it out? And they're like, no, it's still going.
That's awesome.
So the chemistry is proven to be very robust. Lithium iron phosphate is probably the most robust you can get on the market in terms of available chemistries right now.
That's insane.
That's cool. I
And
love that.
going back to these encasements of the batteries, is that 100% waterproof?
Yeah, so we use an epoxy coating, and then we have a conform inside. So we've for if it gets submerged, it's protected. So we're using these types of cases for this application. Some customers, they also They like to also use a battery box. They're like the NOCO has some battery boxes on the market, and they just want to put everything in the box, and then they add another layer to it. If you tip over on the kayak or something happens, they got stuff in there as well. We've added that to the batteries to protect it.
That's awesome.
So going back to like the discharge, right? Like when we were talking about lead acid versus lithium ion, like a lead acid, as that battery's dying, like, for my trolling motor, as an example, like you would go slower and slower and slower, and you'd know when it was full discharge. Is there a way, whereas lithium ion, it's solid, and then when you hit that full discharge, you got nothing? Mm-hmm. Is there a way, and I've seen a couple things, is there a way to know like how much you have left? Like, is there some kind of like regulator or monitor that you can use to know when you're getting close to that?
Yeah, there's a couple products on the market. There's a product. There's a couple products. One product is called a DC inline watt meter. It's a little gadget you put in between the battery and the fish finder or the trolling motor. It's available on various sites. You can go to one of our partners, powerworks.com. It's available online. Look up DC inline watt meter. And that will let you measure what goes in between. It goes right between the battery and the equipment. It'll tell you how many amp hours are used. It's like a fuel gauge, but it kind of works. It needs to know how much is going through the meter. It's like a water meter. That's the analogy. Sure. It just tells you how much is used. Then you'll know when the battery is consumed. Other companies, a company called Victron has made a product called the BMV 712. It's on. I've got customers that use that particular meter. It has a Bluetooth interface, so it goes right to your phone, and it'll actually show you how many amp hours are consumed as well. It's a little fancier. I've seen customers that typically use it on the bass boats. So the batteries is kind of tucked away in the compartment. They want something on the phone that will give you how many amp hours are used. You know exactly when the battery is about to turn off. So there's a lot of companies out there that provide these accessory products that support the lithium batteries to get exactly that information that you need, and they've got all sorts of functionality on it now. So
gotcha,
Brian. I'm glad you brought that up because I just recently killed my battery. I went on 2 trips before that 100 amp hour completely cut out. And on the Xi3, it has a spot that's supposed to show you when you're connected to a lead acid battery. Well, that's not compatible with the lithium ion. So I'm sitting here going and going and going, and all of a sudden it just gets really slow all of a sudden and then just cuts off. I'm like, that battery indicator did not let me know my battery is about to die. That's crazy.
So I'm going to say this because he already corrected you. It's iron phosphate.
Yeah.
Iron phosphate. Yeah. What did I say?
You said ion. It just rolls off the tongue.
It does. Well, I think we're just so accustomed to that nowadays.
Yeah.
That's the term.
I'm glad I honestly couldn't have. I knew there was a difference, but I didn't know it was that much of a difference.
Yeah.
It's a pretty big difference in our industry. It's pretty distinguished. But yeah, it's that meter will help a lot. A lot of customers have installed either the DC inline watt meter or the BMV 712 unit, and it works.
Yeah, I just looked that up, and that thing's awesome.
Yeah,
it's pricey, but it looks cool enough. I'd probably pay for it.
Yeah, the DC inline's a little bit more reasonable. I think one's in the $40 to $50 range. The other one goes up to like close to $200, but you can get the basic one. It will do the job too. So
interesting. I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, that's cool. I think I've heard stories, Brad, like same instance as you, like, and that's why I brought that up is it's something that could be considered. Like me, and here's a question, Kevin, like me personally, after every outing, I just put my battery on the charger and recharge it. Is that bad, or should you do a full discharge?
So there's no memory effect in this chemistry. So that means if you partial cycle the battery, it won't damage or degrade the battery. So if you were to charge it after going out, you'll still get the 2,000 to 3,000 charge cycles. So a cycle is you completely charge the battery, then you completely drain it, the battery shuts off, you charge it again. You get 2,000 to 3,000 of those cycles out of the battery. We're seeing more closer to 3,000 from our analysis so far, which is really good. If you partial cycle it, it's considered, like, let's say you only go half a cycle, that's not one cycle, that's half a cycle. So you could expand the service life of this battery for more than the 7 to 10 years if you don't use it, which is a big deal in the battery industry from what we're seeing. So if you got a battery that's out there at least 8 years and it's still not finished, that means there's still a lot of reserve capacity. So if you're just going out once a week, you're good because you're not cycling it every day.
I'm going to have this battery for 20 years.
Yeah, we'll see how it all goes on the original ones. That first group of customers, we reach out to them quite a bit because we got a couple of units back, and there's still quite a bit of reserve in there. We actually put it on our tester. These were basically this size battery. They were the same type of battery, and we saw, like, when we sent it out, it's like 95 to 98% depth of discharge, really close to 100%. And then after 8 years, it's still is only like 91%, which is still, that's huge, even after that time period. So that means the chemistry is this type of chemistry in this package cell tends to be very robust. And the electric car industry is doing the same thing. They've got cylindrical cells. Their chemistry mix is a little different in the electric car industry. They have to put a lot of high discharge current, so they don't use lithium iron phosphate. They have their own mixes that they made because of some other requirements for what they need to do for running electric motors. But this type of package tends to be the most robust from what the industry is seeing versus any type of pouch cell. Pouch cells are good for phones and maybe your laptop or something like that. But for a marine use application where you need it, you're going to expose it to various temperatures on the cold and high ends. The package is really important for the battery, not just the chemistry, but also how it's packaged.
That's awesome. So a question I had with these style batteries. So like you're saying, they'll 3,000 charges in the last 10 years, stuff like that. If you're not using it heavily, do they have like a shelf life, or do they cycle down? Like, I know, like, for instance, if you take a lead acid battery, I used to work on cars, and we always used to talk about it. You can leave one sitting on the concrete. You can take a brand new lead acid battery. You can leave it out there for 2 or 3 weeks, and it'll be almost dead just from sitting at rest.
Yeah. So the lead acid batteries, they have to again have a tender or some power source attached to the alternator.
Right.
Otherwise, it goes bad. This is different. Lithium iron phosphate batteries, if you let it sit on the shelf for on an annual basis, it only loses 3% of its capacity. So that's a very small amount. That means if you have a 12 amp hour battery, 3%, I got to calculate, is about 0.36 amp hours that's lost, which is extremely low. That's a very low amount, which versus any type of other battery chemistry that is commercially available on the market.
That's awesome.
It's super low. So we have customers that have left stuff sitting for a few months, and they've gone back and they've sent us, emails saying, "Oh, I put it on the charger. It came, everything is working out. This is pretty neat." And we're like, "Yeah, it's pretty cool. You can leave it for a few months and still have a good peace of mind on that." Now, if you don't want to lose that 3%, in the notes we say, we suggest every few months you do charge the battery, because then you won't lose that 3% at the end of the year.
Right.
It's there, right? So better to do that. Some customers, what they like to do is they put notes on their batteries, they put a sticker, and then they just put the dates that they do it. It's small things like that you can do. And
I was curious about it because it's like me and Brad and one of our other guys, Jay, took a trip to Kentucky Lake. I used the battery, it was fully charged. I used it. We were probably, water. It was heavy wind and current, so it really got used. Went home, never charged it. It sat there for a month, and then we had a trip to Tennessee not too long ago, and I tried running my motor and my graph, and I finally killed it. It finally, and the graph and the motor on the battery. That was a lot of. You could watch it pulling it down. But as soon as because I usually run one of y'all's 30 amp hour, I run my 9-inch graph with. Yeah. And I used it the rest of the weekend. I put 3 days of fishing on it, and it never got below 13 volts. It never dropped. And then when I put just the 100 amp back on the motor, I didn't kill it in 2 days. So but I was just curious about that because I know I had used it hard, let it sit, and then didn't charge it and went at it again. I was just wondering what that rate of loss was. And at that 1 month, it'd be like nothing.
It's small. That little meter that I mentioned earlier will be really useful because you'll be very surprised. In fact, we've checked with folks in terms of the consumption. It's very small. The fish finders pull about a couple amps. It's the trolling motors that have a little bit of variance. In other words, between trolling motors, some pull more amps than others at 12 volts. Now, the high voltage ones, those are more on bass boats. But a 12-volt trolling motor, we've seen, depending on the conditions in the water. So if it's a high current, the motor works much harder, and so it has to pull more power out of the battery. So if you find that it's really choppy out there, the battery, you need a larger battery to keep up with that type of environment. But if you're on a calm, in a lagoon or lakes out here on the West Coast, our lakes are very calm, and lagoons are very, very calm. But if you're out in the Great Lakes area or wherever you're based, different parts of the country, it's going to be a lot different. So that meter will help you because it will actually tell you how many amp hours are being consumed out of the battery and amps, and you'll be surprised. It's all a function of the water current. It's just the flow rate in the water. What's the speed of the what's going on in the water, pretty much, and it will completely affect the runtime on the battery for trolling motors. Fish finders, the graphs, we're seeing a lot of the bigger the screens, the more power they're consuming. The transducer, apparently there's some things that we checked with some of the manufacturers. The electronics that are going in the sonar portion of it, there's more power consumption now because of all this side imaging and scanning. That thing pulls a lot of power. So the old fish finders graphs, they were pulling maybe about 1/2 to 3/4 an amp. Some now are pulling, I've seen 2 amps. I've seen some up to 3 amps and higher. And it depends on the manufacturer. And it's just going that trend right now. So the lead batteries, they just don't work out at all.
Oh, no, I had a 12. I'm sorry, Brad, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it's funny he mentioned the battery use. This is a testament to the 100 amp hour Bioenno battery I have. One charge got me upstream and back, 2 trips. That was 12 miles. And it finally died within the last half mile to the boat ramp.
Yeah,
and I'm going up current that's raging downstream 2 to 3 miles an hour.
Yeah. When I took it to lacrosse, when I put it through its first paces, I went 5 miles in a current that was so strong the boat would only do 1 mile an hour. Yeah. And I did that for 6 hours, and it never checked up. And I have no fear of that battery failing me on the water, straight up. It works.
I was on the Colorado River about a few weeks ago, and we were running some batteries out there. There's a marina out there, and so I typically have gone with some. I don't fish that much, so that's the thing. My colleagues are more into that. So where I've gone is up in the lakes and down in some lagoons here, but in the Colorado River, it's So I got to experience that, and you need a large battery for the trolling motor. For sure. It's without a doubt. And from what we've seen, some of the errors and mistakes that are made with the purchase of the trolling motor battery is they undersize it, the customers, and we need to consult with them and see where exactly they're using it. Because, maybe you don't need a 100 amp hour battery in a lagoon or a calm lake, right? But you'll need it on a river fighting 4 miles an hour current. It's really important that you size it up to meet that requirement. And so we've we work with people to determine the differences based on the water conditions. So it's really cool.
Yeah, no, that even when I emailed and was talking with you, I was like, yeah, I'm running a 55-pound trolling motor. I just think I should get an 80, and Kevin was like, no, 100.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
now I'm
tried it
so
out.
glad that I did that. Like,
to know what's going on.
Yeah, that does bring up a good question though, because we've had listeners ask they don't have the money for a 100 amp hour battery. What is the lowest you would go for a 12-volt trolling motor?
So it's how many pound thrusts? That's the question.
Just typical 55.
55. Yeah, it's gonna be I wouldn't go less than the 60.
Okay.
You going less than the 60, it's just not gonna meet the requirements for the run times, especially if you're fighting some current in the water. If you're on a calm lake or something that's calm, that's really it's not. You could go maybe a little bit lower, 40, 50 amp hours. But if you experience, if you're going to tournaments and you're experiencing different water conditions, you need something a little bit larger. If you're more casual, if in the audience, if you're not going out these tournaments and it's all recreational, the smaller one you can get by with a bit of a shorter runtime, half a day as opposed to the whole day, if that's acceptable. So just want to, it just depends.
yeah, no, and it, Brad bringing it up about people not being able to afford or not wanting to spend the money on a, the 100 amp battery. Well, just listening to what you've talked about of what you can expect and how long to last. And I mean, and just like you were saying, Kevin, a lot of these guys, they're getting used once or twice a week, at most, and not all the time like Brad's talking about heavily. So if you invest in one of these batteries, you might decide to get out of kayak fishing before you ever finish that battery off, so.
Yeah,
it's a heck of an investment.
Heck, I mean, we'll be in something completely different than what kayaks are now in 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be, I don't even want to think about it.
They'll have Bioenno batteries built into them or something. Who knows?
Right.
Might have that. Yeah, it's been the market's growing for sure. Just compared to what it was even 10 years ago, it's very different than what it used to be.
All right, I guess my next question is, since the 100 amp hour battery is a little bigger, how many of those cells are actually in those?
I think there's about 130 or 140 cells that make the 12-volt 100 battery.
Holy
That's
cow.
crazy.
Yeah, it's somewhere in that range. It's quite a bit that make it up. Each battery cell is 3.2 volts, 3.3 amp hours. So they get strung together and then they make a large pack. There are cylindrical cells in there, and then they get monitored. So there's spot welding, and then there's some wiring that senses all the different cells, and the circuit board monitors all of that internally, like a computer just monitors it. And it has some capabilities of it fault tolerance, things like that. So it's all built into the pack. So it's pretty neat how it works. It
is crazy.
Very nice.
It makes me want to take one apart, but I'm not going to. That's usually how I figure out how something works, is I take it apart.
Yep.
I'm not going to do that this time, though.
Probably not safe, right?
Yeah, there's spot welding. You have to remove a circuit board. You have to be trained on what wires to pull and what not. We don't advise. So we do that here in our facility. We have a production facility here in Santa Ana, California. So we've been, building here. We have production here, support here. We can do everything here in California, nationwide. So we can support this product here. We do support it, which is good. So some other companies don't have that capability, but we do. So it gives us, I think, opportunity for your customers or potential customers that want to learn more about it. They can certainly, contact us.
That's cool. Awesome.
Sweet.
That was something I was going to ask, is like manufactured in-house or shipped overseas, or because we were talking, a lot of people, a lot of people get on that, American made is better, blah, 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 blah. And we were talking about it, like a lot of guys that are all about that don't realize that, like, tungsten weights that are real big in the fishing industry, tungsten is not harvested naturally in North America.
Yeah. And it's not even 100%,
Yeah. I wasn't sure how that was with lithium batteries. I was like, it could be another one of those things that the material itself raw may come from overseas, but I was glad that you got on that. So you manufacture, put everything together.
Yeah, we have a production over here, and so it lets us be able to respond quickly to the market demands. We can build different size batteries pretty quickly doing that in the battery industry. And also maintaining that quality control is really critical. So, but yeah, it's pretty good. We're expanding the business throughout the next several years. We have a plan for that as well. So we've growing that business, it's growing different product lines and things like that. So we're on that trajectory, which is good. So we're going to continue to do that. And so despite COVID and things like that, that was a little bit of a hiccup this year, but that's been, sorted out. That was mostly government kind of requirements, but now we're going to do that. Yep.
Yeah.
What's the biggest battery you guys have made?
We can do up to 12 volt, 300 amp hours, which is going to be in an 8D size case, which is something that weighs about 90 pounds. It's 300 amp hour lithium. It's on our website. It's as big as kind of, it's like 3 12 volt hundreds kind of stacked side by side in terms of the case. But 8D is the size case we can do. That's typically, from what we've seen, it's mostly for the like RV market, campers, but we've done it also for the houseboats. So
that's cool.
There are customers that live on boats. We got customers here that live on houseboats here off the coast. It's not as many people, but there are people that live on boats and out on the East Coast too. It's like in Florida, for example, here in California, it's common. Get a slip and you can rent a slip and live there. And so they need more power. So they need 300 amp hours. You'd be surprised. 300 amp hours is actually, when you run a bunch of stuff, you can use it you can bring it, you can consume it quite a bit. So they might get a pair of those. We've done installs, up to, I've seen 900 amp hours. So that's 3 of those.
That's crazy.
Configurations. But I would say like 1 to 2 pieces of those tend to be the most common in the setups on houseboats. Obviously on a kayak it's a little different, but on a bass trolling motor for days. You're going to use more for the trolling motors. But
it makes me think, when you said the 8D case, it makes me think, if I used to do industrial heavy equipment mechanic, so you would have the 36 volt 8D. I don't even know how many coal cranking amps. I mean, they were giant batteries, but you'd have those packs wired series for forklifts and all sorts of cool stuff. So but that houseboats, that's cool. The place we just got back from, Eastport Marina and Resorts on Del Hollow Lake in Tennessee, and one of the local guys was telling me that it's the houseboat capital of the world. That's what you see when you go out on that lake is I don't know how the DNR has everything set up, but they have places all over the lake where you can just legally pull up and dock a houseboat and tie it off to the bank.
Yeah,
pretty neat.
That's cool. Yeah, going back to these batteries, the 300 amp hour, it's funny that that's mentioned right now because KBF recently talked about having 2 motors on a kayak, one front, one in back.
Yeah.
You could have a battery for both motors, and that could be the battery.
Yeah, you could certainly do it. You could do a 300 amp. You could do a couple 100s, maybe balance the weight. I know weight balance is critical too, depending on how much you got in there. But yeah, it's pretty exciting with all these new trolling motors out there, and I'm hearing there's new designs, brushless, things like that. I'm not an expert on trolling motors, but people that I know in the industry manufacture them. They're telling me that there's going to be a lot of advances happening over the next several years. So
yeah, that's something that I definitely can't wait for, is brushless. Because they've got a few of the high-end 36 volt brushless trolling motors now. I definitely can't wait till that trickles down for the smaller stuff we're using. Because for anybody that doesn't mess with any kind of electric motor, brushed versus brushless is a world of difference. Yeah,
huge difference.
Lower operating temperatures, they can handle the strain forever.
Is the XI3 Brushless?
I don't
Or
think
no?
so. I
don't
think that
believe so.
like the Lowrance trolling motor, and I think the new Garmin or whatever,
Garmin, I think, is
and I think
brushless.
Oh,
the
okay.
newest Minn Kota, the big one, I think is brushless. But there's not many of them out there yet.
Yeah, that will be kind of the trend down the line, and that means it runs better off batteries. The runtime, because the amperage is less on
Yeah.
brushless versus with the brush, and so that means you get a better runtime off the battery, which is a huge deal. So it'll be great, and I think there's going to be a lot of improvements along that front.
Well,
That's interesting.
Brad, did you have a bunch more battery questions? Because I had something I wanted him to hit on.
Well, just the 20 amp hour battery, just because I have one. Is there a reason why you guys decided to put the screw in post instead of like a spade terminal?
On the 20 amp hour battery?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have a harness that we typically manufacture with a ring terminal that we normally put on there, so that was the reason behind it. We could do it with a spade terminal, but we decided just because of the ring terminal and the harness, we decided to do that. That was the only reason. And we had a legacy model that had screw terminals, and now these just have it's the same concept except with a nut and bolt. So
Yeah, I actually like that though because it just makes it easier. I think the battery comes with the harness, right?
Yeah, we can add them with the harnesses. Customers can email us. We have accessories as well listed on the site. So if you need harnesses, we can provide them. It tends to be easier to take it on and off. The spade terminals are on the 12 amp hour batteries just because it's a classic package that we didn't want to adjust. So, but on the 20 amp, we put those screw terminals on.
Yeah. That's pretty, and like something with the spade terminal versus the screw-on terminal is you put one of those harnesses on and you're not constantly wearing the terminals out, pulling them on and off, on and off. So that's a huge advantage.
Yeah, that's what we suggest as well. So with these batteries, use a harness because then you won't damage any of the terminal posts or the spade terminals. Just leave it on and then just physically disconnect from the harness. That's the best way to use the product.
Oh yeah, and for anybody listening, that'd be the smarter. I mean, it's all about how fast you can get on and off the water most of the time. So go ahead and make it easier on yourself.
Exactly.
Well, yeah. Well, if that was Brad's last question on battery, what about you, Brian?
I want to get into some solar stuff because I know that's a huge thing.
We've got
messed with the low voltage side of solar.
Yeah, we've got we also provide these foldable solar panels. We have larger ones. They're kind of like large rigid panels that you put on the ground. This is a portable foldable solar panel. This is it's based on what's called monocrystalline technology. It offers the most amount of power per unit square area. It has a connector cabling that comes attached to the panel, and then we have these controller boxes that you can purchase with the solar panels, and you could charge any of the batteries. So if you wanted to, let's say, you don't have access to AC power, and you wanted to charge these out in the field, you could get a portable solar panel setup and charge these batteries. Of course, it'd have to be during the daytime. I mean, I don't know how that work out in terms of competition or tournaments, but if you got the time or for some more casual use, a lot of customers get the battery first, and then they end up getting these solar panels to charge up the batteries. So you could use them for any size battery. We've got the ability to expand these panels out. So if you get, you can chain them together. We have on our website these larger 40 watt, 60 watt, even 100 watt, and they're all based on this foldable concept where they kind of fold up like this and they Velcro shut. So they're really lightweight. They're really easy to carry. A lot of power per unit square area. They're not like the little solar panels that you've seen them, the ones that were for your phones. These put out the right power that's required for charging, a battery of this size. So if you wanted to get those panels, it's very easy. It's automated. You don't have to. We got the setups, and we're seeing a trend. For a lot of outdoors use, where if they don't have access to power, they're using solar to charge it up for whatever reason. They're camping or maybe you're going to go out there and you're going to a place where there's no, AC power. You need solar to charge it up.
No, yeah, that like we were talking about before with the, that like micro camper, the whole purpose of that was to be able to kind of, get off the grid and camp wherever you want to. And I think that would be, that would really unlimit you, really. I mean, obviously cloudy, rainy days can hinder, you get a week of storms, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but I definitely, because you could couple that with inverters and you could have your AC power. Like, that's killer.
Exactly. Yeah, you can set up larger panels. It's on our website, the BSP 100 series. You can attach them to the top of a camper or an RV, feed it into the controller box, and then charge up the batteries for those applications. So it just depends on what you want to do. And on the houseboats, on the larger boats, we've seen these solar setups where they put these thin panels and they mount it and they charge up the battery banks that they have. So
that's
interesting. They've got the area to do that.
Going back to the foldable series panels, what for because a lot of the guys in kayaking are going for the 100 amp batteries. The guys that are serious, everybody's getting the big battery. What would you need to efficiently and somewhat quickly charge one of those? Would you need one of those panels? Would you need, to link like 400 watt panels together? What would you need?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the 100 amp hour battery has like 1,200 watt hours of storage. So you do need a large panel setup in order to charge it within the day. So if you've got 200 watt worth of panels, it's going to take about 5 to 6 hours to charge up a drained battery. So it's kind of a large panel array. So you need the area to charge it up. So I would say 200 watts for a 6-hour charge time on a 100 amp hour battery. So most customers end up getting a couple of the 120 watt panels or a couple of 100 watt panels, and that can charge it up within 6 hours if the battery is completely drained.
Right. So that's what I was going to say. With these batteries not discharged, you're not killing them in one day most of the time unless you're doing something like Brad. So you could almost, in theory, could you maintain it? So like if you only pulled it down 25%, you got off the water in time, the solar could maintain that. Yeah, where you're not having to drain and completely recharge, but you're kind of staying in that spot.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so if you pull, let's say 25% off the 100 amp hour battery, you only pulled 25 amp hours out of that battery. 120 watt panel, one piece would charge it up in a couple hours. So if you didn't bring it all the way down, you'd like 25%, then you can capture that difference back because you only brought it 25% down, 75% remaining, charge it back up. So that would certainly work fine if your consumption is not heavy duty consumption throughout the day.
So this has got my gears turning. I may have to get one of
those. Yeah, I know.
No, it's interesting.
How do I rig this up?
Yeah. I'm already thinking like, where can I put this?
No, it's interesting. Like I didn't think a solar panel could like charge a battery that quick, and plugging the 100 amp hour into the wall here at home, it's about the same time. I think it's like 6 hours to fully charge it.
Depends how drained it is.
Yeah,
it depends.
It doesn't take long at all.
Yeah, I think like a decent day on the water for me, I'll pull it out. I think my trolling motor is 50 pound versus 55, but I think mine typically charges in like maybe 3 or 4 hours. And that's after a full day on the water, I mean, not necessarily running up current,
The longest mine took was just about 6, and it was at Del Hollow when Brian had to tow me back because I had forgotten to charge it and killed it. It took forever. But I killed that. Like it obviously just like you were talking about with the lithium. I wasn't losing speed or power, but my low battery light came on the graph, and I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah.
And I started headed back, and not 2 minutes later, it shut off on me. Just nice and quiet, just click. I was like, well, there it goes. found the other end of the battery.
Yeah, that meter is going to be important to get for you guys. I think even the little inline meter is probably a really useful for what you guys need for sure.
Yeah,
that'll solve that problem quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was nice when I had them, when I had the one battery running the graph and the motor. My graph, you have an option to put the voltage on the screen so you can watch your voltage fluctuate. Like when I hit the motor on high, you could watch it pull the voltage down, like the 1/10, and I could just watch it going down. But normally I'm using the one battery for the motor and the one for the screen. So I have zero idea. I just have a lot of confidence that it's not going to die.
I was going to ask about that because when I messaged you or emailed you earlier in the year about batteries, you said to run separate batteries because of interference. Can you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, there's right now from what I've seen is some of the transducers and the sonars and the trolling motor. The trolling motor has electrical noise that might get into the transducer on the fish finder, and so if you're running it on the same battery, that can all come back in, but it's from the motor's electrical noise getting into the transducer and the sonar. And then because it's a common positive and negative path, it's a loop, the signal might get into that. So what I've heard, at least on those that are running on the bass boats, they said if they run them separately, that noise doesn't exist. Now, I don't know how much it's an issue on every fish finder, but I've seen it happen. And that's not from the battery. That's from one piece of equipment in the motor generating electrical noise going back into the transducer. And they say, what's this garbage that's on the screen? And so if they isolate it, then there's no way for that path to be common from the motor's electrical noise going into the transducer.
No,
it's on the same path.
A cool point, because that day I was getting weird, graph signatures. I was getting, it was mostly clear, but I had a weird line, and I thought it was because me and some of the guys were getting close to each other, and sometimes the transducers will ping off of each other, and you'll get weird zigzags and stuff. I thought that's what it was, but it was something I had never seen in that particular way, and that's probably what that was. Because the next day we went out, I separated my batteries again, and it was gone. I hadn't done it since.
If you separate it, it will go away, and that you can confirm from the motor by turning it on and off and seeing how it registers on the graph. And so separating it, we've been playing with that on a few of the places we've been testing the fish finders with batteries and trolling motors, just by isolating it. It's called, you're separating the path, and that works, and it's gone, that noise. So
awesome.
Jimmy thought he was on a big school of fish. Little did he know it was just interference.
It looked like a crazy, sound wave. It was just a wave going on the bottom of the graph, and I was like, "What is this?" And then I thought I was too close to. I think I was next to you, and I was like, "Well, we're just pinging off each other," and then it just wouldn't go away. And I was like, "Well, maybe I've got a piece of grass hung on the transducer or something."
Weird.
But no, that's probably what it was, because it seriously hasn't done it since then.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
Jimmy, we got away from the solar panel stuff. We got back to batteries. So you want to circle around the solar panels?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of, he answered my question so quickly, and now I know what I want. But so I'm trying to.
I got something.
I've got one small question, because it's something. So with my camper, it's already got lead acid batteries and an inverter system in it. If I swap it to lithium, do you have to have a different inverter, or is that lithium, is it compatible?
It's compatible. The inverter controllers, the charging voltage is between 14 to 15 volts for the battery, and most of the legacy systems are in that same charging voltage range. So the circuitry in the battery will accept that as a valid input for charging the battery. So you can do a change out without having to change the box. It will work. We've tried it out quite a bit on several units. There's maybe a couple really old campers that the charging voltage is too low, but there's a way there's another box we can put in between that will fix that. Yeah, it will raise the voltage, and then it will charge the battery fully. So there is a way around it. If box is really old. But for anything that was built in the past 25 years, it seems to be fine. It's really the old stuff from I've seen prior to that. And you'd be surprised. We do a lot of interesting change outs, and they actually, we've had customers that have rolled up here to our facility to do change outs.
That's awesome.
So
as long as Brian didn't have this inverter he put in this trailer on his shelf for like 30 years, I think I'm good.
Yeah, no.
I've seen the man redneck some stuff together, so I have to ask.
You're good on that one.
But the paddle and fin trailer is going to get a freaking makeover. Like,
I like it.
I'm going to map the top of that thing out in solar panels, put lithiums in it.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, we've been talking about doing a short bus and building that out and doing solar on top.
That would fit you.
I know. That's why we're talking about doing it.
You and Jay rolling around the country in a short bus.
That's what I'm talking about.
That's crazy.
The solar panels. So, the folding ones. How quick does that charge a 20 amp hour?
The foldable panel here, this one would charge up a 20 amp hour battery if it's half full in about 3 hours. Something like this. And then if it's completely drained, about 6 hours. If you want to do it in 1.5 hours, you just need 2 of them. So you get a pair of these. They actually chain together. There's a chaining connection on the back, and then one plugs into the other. So they would plug in side by side. Then you can expand these panels out, which is what's really neat about is we give them that flexibility to expand out the solar panels. You can start with one, but you can add more if you need it.
Ooh, so here's a question. So like if because I have a 30 amp hour battery also, let's say I had a couple of the 125 panels for charging the big battery. Could I charge the 30 with it, or would it be like too much too fast?
That's the same thing.
No, you can do that. The circuitry built into the battery has a protection against the overcurrent function. So there's circuitry that's built into the battery that protects against that. You can use, the only thing is you have to use one controller for each battery. So in other words, you might need a couple controllers, but you could use the same panel. So you could use one panel, big panel, and feed 2 controllers. So you might need a couple controllers for each battery. This is, they're about $50, the base entry-level controllers. And you could just get, it's a couple that would just go into each battery.
That's cool.
So, yeah.
What do the panels run?
The panels, they start at about $100, $105, and they go up to about $200. They're in that range. Okay. Some are a little bit more expensive. The really high end is like $230, but they're pretty reasonable. The price points are good.
Yeah, and for them being the higher end panels, like you said, putting out the correct amount of power, that's insane. That's a killer price in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, are those 100% waterproof too?
So the larger panels that are rigid, that have a glass laminate, they're waterproof. This one is, you don't want to leave this in a soaking rain. You can have water resistant, but it's not meant to be stuck in the soaking rain, this type of panel, because this has a special type of nylon backing, and we just want to be careful. If you leave it out there too long, you have to clean it up a bit because of this material that we use. But the glass ones with the laminate, with the aluminum frame, that's exactly the same material they use on rooftop solar. So the ones that are in a big suitcase, those, yes, that's fine. If it gets in the rain, it's not a problem.
I'm about to go broke. I'm about to solar. I'm gonna solar my house.
We lost Brian again, I think.
Oh, but let's make sure we're all not about to fly out of here.
I know. Well, I think we're pretty much winding down anyway. We're getting close. So
I can't think of any other questions. I'm trying to think if there's anything I was wanting to ask that we missed, but we've hit all of it. You hit, good job on all the detail, Kevin.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I learned a lot. I really did.
Appreciate it. Yeah, if you have any questions, let me know. We can certainly answer them if you have more questions from the viewers or listeners. So appreciate the opportunity and the invitation.
No, man.
Yeah.
We wanted to get you on to spread the word about another great lithium company. There's a couple that the kayak industry are using that are kind of well known, and
they're just really expensive.
But I think that your product I would be safe to say, is probably better. I don't hear a lot of the detail coming out of those companies, of what their product is, how it's made. You broke it down really well. So we wanted to get you on to give other people a chance to know that there's another option and possibly a better option, and, get your stuff in as many kayakers' hands as we can.
Appreciate it. Thank you, guys. And look forward to talking to you guys at another time. Thanks again.
Yeah. If you ever have any other new products you want to come on to talk about, you're more than welcome to come back on. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Appreciate it.
So, yeah, we'll end this here. Again, thanks for coming on the show. Guys, check out Bioenno Power. There are some great batteries that everybody here in Paddle and Fin's using. So, yeah. Anything else, Jimmy?
No, man, that's it. Another good show.
Great show, man. That was fun. Kind of sad it's over. But yeah, we'll see you guys next week, and you guys have a good weekend.
Thanks for tuning in to another killer episode on Paddle and Fin. Don't forget to go check out our website at paddle_and_fin.com. Don't forget to check out the YouTube channel at Paddle and Fin. If you got a question, comment, want to hear from a future guest on a future episode, feel free to email us at paddle_and_fin@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Paddle and Fin on Facebook and Instagram. Shout out to our show supporters, Angler. The Angler button and app just makes for a better time on the water and creates a virtual logbook for every fishing outing out on the water. Shout out to Rocktown Adventures, located in Northern Illinois, for all your kayaking, camping, and hiking needs. TRC Covers, protect your investment. Ketch Products, shout out to Ketch Products. Go to ketchproducts.com and put the Paddle and Fin logo directly on your catch board. Shout out to JigMasters Jigs. When in doubt, get the jig out. Go to JigMasters.com, use promo code PNF20 and save 20% on all your jig and tackle needs.